Waagte, Prashwakutsquest, Latin Clue. It's an honor to be here today, to share the history of our people, history of my generations of families. It's an honor to be here today to see everybody wanting to learn and to understand our Indigenous families around the world. Thank you for the song that you sing in the welcoming. Thank you, Ben, for allowing me to be a part of the Winta family. It's an honor to be standing up here, not just for myself, but for my country, for my province, for my region, for my community, for my nation, mostly all my family. And when I stand up here, I always pull the braid out in front of me, not because I want you to stare at it, but also it has a story that comes with it. And that story is the 7 generations that I carry with me. And how I'm a part of the 7 generations, what Ben was mentioning earlier. It ain't about us why we stand up here and talk. It's about the other generations around us, the 3 that were before us and the 3 that are coming. So when I do every morning, when I braid my hair, one of the things I do is I close my eyes and I honor my past, which represents my great-grandparents, my parents, and my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents. And when I talk about them, they always taught me what my culture had to offer. And it was an honor to actually sit there and to learn from my grandparents growing up with my teachings. And it was an honor to, when they passed on to the spirit world, I got then passed down to my parents, who were taught by their grandparents. So I have 3 generations in one braid, in one strand. My middle braid represents myself, which is present. So everything I do today and how I evolve with my culture today is what I get to share with everybody here today. So you're present and learning what I'm learning. And my right braid, my right strand represents my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. So every morning, I close my eyes and I intertwine all the generations together. Because what I've learned from the past, I'm passing it on to you today, and I'm also going to be passing it on to my children for tomorrow. I don't forget where I come from, because when I speak on behalf of them. It's an honor to be raised on the land, by the land. It's also to recognize the animals that we live with amongst our territory, but most of all the people. And the people that I grew up with are on a community. We have about 1,000 in my community. So it's an honor to have a huge family and to have an extended family that sits around the world. I always dreamt that one day I'll get the opportunity to share my history with the world, and you are here today. And it's always a dream to share the things that I share with everybody, and I think it comes from, when you look at the picture, is the animals. That's why I have these bear paws on me, because they don't have a voice. And when our world works with Indigenous tourism, when I first looked at Indigenous tourism for an opportunity to share the culture, one of the things I've learned over time, again, like what Ben was saying, I had to break it down for my 4-year-old girl. And that was, Dad, what do you do for work? I said, daughter, I take care of the land, the animals, and the people. That's as simple as you can put our culture and the generations that follow that. We've followed that lineage for years, and that's something that we always will continue to follow. Because what I explained about my braid has the same issues, the same things that they're going to have to deal with. And Indigenous tourism has given me a light and opportunity to grow with that. And my company, what you see, is a canoe company. And we're on the river right through a community with about 80,000 people. Everybody seems to be driving around, but yet they never touch the river. In our language, we call that Selkwa. And we say, Lak Selkwa, means good water. So, every time we have a zip, we take for granted the things that we just look at. Whether it's the beauty of the lake or the mountains, there's a purpose for those places. Whether it's gathering medicine, gathering berries, hunting, fishing, we always follow a cycle. And that's those 4 seasons that we follow. And so for me to start a company last year, that bear I always represent, in our language we call it skolaks, black bear. And we always make sure we honor our animals, because without them, we won't be living today. So we always take care and make sure that they're recognized and honored with us. So when we tell our stories and we get you in the canoe, one of the things we do is we sing our songs, we tell our stories, but mostly we tell our personal life journeys. There's only one journey that I live with, and that's with myself and the teachings I shared with you earlier. So for me, when I looked through that, when I was getting curious about wanting to be a part of the Indigenous tourism industry, I had to start doing my research. I have this I call him a young man in front of me, Glenn. He's a mentor, a brother to me. This man is instrumental to doing a lot with the biosphere sustainability now around the world. He's recognized around the world. And for us to be that partnership and having that Indigenous content with what he's sharing is what we're dealing with today, with how we're going to manage the people in the tourism industry. I couldn't find a better partner to work with. He's a great brother that I really appreciate his teachings, his thoughts. I really watch how he works with the different countries. He's signing MOUs around the world. He's doing a lot, not only for ourselves, but people are coming to our country now wanting to learn a little bit more about where we're at and what we're doing. And I always say we're the David of the Goliath. We're a small region. We're not talking about Canada as a whole. We're talking about one little spot on the map of Canada. And that just shows you the leadership that he has and the leadership that we use with Indigenous tourism of BC, the Indigenous tourism of Canada. It just goes on. And then for me, I can't think of another way to share our culture in a good way. It's a part of my healing that I have to learn to grow with, and I get to share it with everybody. So I look at it when I first started it, there's a business, and then there's the culture. What made it work for me was the education. So if I bring you as guests to my country, you're going to learn at the same time my child is going to learn with me. So that's the cool part of it. We all learn together. In our language, we call that kanuchantwa, helping one another. So that really teaches everybody around that circle that no one's better or the other, we're all equal. No matter if you're 4 years old, 40 years old, 80 years old, we all have a purpose that sit around that circle. And the one thing I love doing before I'm done is I love sharing songs. I really love the introductory you did this morning, but I love doing one with everybody has to get involved. So what I usually do is I sing an honor song. And that honor song to me represents the different things in life. Again, it's the animals, the people, and the land. So when we sit here, I want everybody to stand up. So there's one thing in common that we have, and that's our heartbeat, right? But we're going to use our hands. So when I start singing, I do the 4 corners, north, south, west, east. And to have the history here in Berlin and in Germany is a perfect world to see 2 worlds come together, 2 different divisions come together. And that's the neat thing to be a part of Berlin, to be here to learn and listen to your culture and history. But this song is to honor Berlin also for allowing me to be here today. So what I want to do is a heartbeat. So on a heartbeat, you can go like this. Just like your heartbeat. There you go. Don't go any faster. I'm going to sing 3 verses, and those 3 verses, when I quit clapping, I want you to join singing with me. Okay? So you can close your eyes, and when I start singing, you can open them again. Hey, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, ho. Hey, yo, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, ho. Hey, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, ho. Hey, yo, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, ho. Hey, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, ho. Hey, yo, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, ho. Hey, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, ho, ho. Hey, yo, 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 yo, ho, ho. Hey, Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank. Stay with me.
You bet.
Stay with me. Thank you so much, Frank. I wanted to ask you if you had some questions so far to ask to Ben and Frank. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentations. I'm from Oklahoma, so for people that don't know, it's a region where the US government was sending all the Native American tribes for a long time. And that's a quite unfortunate thing in my opinion, but it gave me the chance throughout my childhood to come in contact with many different tribes and cultures. And I just had like a question for you guys as an organization representing Native groups around the world. How do you kind of deal with the fact that, I mean, there's tribes from Polynesia and Siberia and the Americas. How do you deal with kind of the linguistic aspect of things? Like how do you communicate with everyone? And also, being that the tribes are located in different countries, they're struggling with different things, different laws, different types of discrimination. So how do you guys like really represent everybody equally, and how do you like join everybody together?
Well, I might say that wherever we go, there's always someone that speaks English that can act as a translator for us. And that's what we usually look for before we ever enter a new area, you know, with a different language. Then we're all English-speaking people in New Zealand and Canada, United States and Australia. So it's essential that we communicate and do it in a good way. And the best way is through native translators in the country that we're going into. And we've always been successful in doing that. You had another part of your question.
Yeah, like with all the differences in cultures and like different styles of kind of discrimination depending on which country these tribes are in, how do you kind of represent everybody equally?
Before we ever go into a country or a native homelands, we study the place where we're going. So we know as much as we possibly can from published materials and from talking to people what their cultures are about. And we're very sensitive to that. I have my own culture. These gentlemen have their own. But the focus is on the culture that we're going to visit, and we must know that. So we do due diligence, if you will, before we do a visit. And that always serves us very well. So we don't make any blunders. And we always defer to these spokespeople and to the elders for these places that we go into. Right, John? Any other questions? By the way, I'm going to Oklahoma later this month. I'm going to Shawnee to visit some people there.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'm from West Africa. I'm from Benin Republic, and most of your cultural heritage looks like mine in Benin. And I happen to come from a village that is the head of our history in the Benin Republic, about kingship and culture, as it looks like. But now, as you are doing business and you are dealing with culture, I would like to know how you respond to cultural boundaries, about the way you relate with people when you travel to another tribe.
Yeah. Well, we're a very small organization, and we have limitations because we're small. And so we can't go to every place, but we try to go to places where we think would serve our strategy the best for developing tourism. For example, in your area, I'm not sure what indigenous tourism you have there, but before we even think about going, we would have to study your situation. Can our presence in Africa best be served by perhaps going to Namibia or Kenya, where indigenous tourism is fairly well developed already? So those are the kind of questions that we ask ourselves before we ever go into a new region.
And how do you relate to the Maasai people, like in Kenya, where the Maasai people, you know, they don't have gates. You enter by clapping.
Yeah.
How do you relate to them, since you are used to gates in your culture?
Well, we know just very few people. We know one of the most outstanding guides, a Maasai man. So we take our signals from him on what to do and not what not to do, and that usually is the best that we can do. This guide that we have, he calls himself James, but that's not his real name. He gives us those signals on what's proper and what's not proper to do in visiting his villages. And he's also an excellent tour guide, so he knows the tourism business in Kenya very well. So that's how we would approach, and plus he speaks English very well too. So he's a good translator for us.
Okay, so what are some of your challenges when you are crossing boundaries?
Pardon me?
When you are crossing boundaries, what are some of your challenges?
Crossing boundaries?
What are the challenges you face when you get into another cultural setting?
It's usually not a concern to us. We deal in different cultures, so I guess we're constantly crossing boundaries. We go to South America. We've been to Easter Island. We've been to places in Africa already, in Asia as well. The South Pacific Islands, we've had relationships with them. So yes, we're always crossing boundaries, but always trying to be sensitive to the cultures that we're visiting.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that answers you. Yes, sir.
So you evocated the United Nations Declaration of the Right of Indigenous Knowledge
I
Sharing.
can't hear him very
Oh,
well.
can you come closer, or he doesn't hear you? No.
Okay. So you evocated the United Nations Declaration of the Right of Indigenous People
Yes.
Knowledge Sharing.
Right.
So could you please give us a brief detail about this declaration? The second question, are there any contacts with African indigenous tribes, such as the Nama, the Herero in Namibia, the Ndebele in South Africa and Zimbabwe, the Maasai, the Nyamwezi in East Africa?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The first question?
Give me more details about the UNDRIP.
Oh, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We have been to Geneva to meet a lot of other indigenous people. There are issues with that declaration around the world, many, many violations around the world. And so indigenous people come together regularly at the United Nations to discuss those violations and to seek solutions. We are also taught about reconciliation. When you have differences within a country, how to reconcile those differences. So that's one of the reasons that we go to the United Nations, is because we learn how to reconcile the differences. But first of all, we must understand that that declaration has violations all around the world, always. Some of them are, indigenous people are suffering yet today from those violations. Some are being displaced from their homes. Some are being violently attacked by corporate security people or by government agents. So there are many very serious issues to address with regard to that declaration. And then there are other countries such as Canada, New Zealand, and the United States, where the violations are not quite as violent and serious as they are in places like South America, perhaps the Philippines. But still, we have violations even in our countries too. So it's kind of the way the declaration is. But fortunately for the United Nations, they are attempting to facilitate and to resolve as many of these differences as they can.
Hi, my name is Esteban. I would like to know your impressions about, because limiting, a little bit the question of the gentleman, and having, for example, the day today. Today is Women's Day, and for me, because I always like to think the things from the other side a little bit. For me, it's a shame that today we are celebrating the Women's Day. It shouldn't be any celebration of the Women's Day. Everybody should have the same rights, and that's it. Why we should have a Women's Day? It is, it's very sad that 2019 we are trying to, promote these kind of things because there is a need. That's what I mean. The same with the human rights. What do you mean that we need to have a Declaration of Human Rights? I mean, all the humans are just humans, so that's it. Why you have to point out and make clear, that they have human rights? The same thing with now. I don't know. I want to know your impressions because that's what I think. The same thing with the indigenous people. What do you mean that we have to do a declaration for the indigenous people when all the people that came all over Europe, for example, in that case North America, they should have a kind of declaration for the people who are coming to them in order to be integrated. That's my opinion. Those people, the indigenous, because indigenous are the locals, they don't need to be recognized the rights. They don't need to be integrated. They just need to be what they need to be in the place. I don't know. I want to know what is your impressions about this talk and how do you feel about it?
Well, I think one of the people, one of the things that most people understand and accept is that white men have the most privileges in this world. And so you may not understand what it is to be a part of a minority or an underprivileged part of society. And women have traditionally been underprivileged, underserved.
This I know is your impression about that we reach the point that this has to be recognized, So this I agree with you. You know what I mean?
Well, everyone should have their day. They should be treated as equals. There's probably no question there. And the fact that they are not treated as equals is why we have these declarations and we have the Year of the Women. We have those kinds of recognition because those groups need more attention to become equals in their societies. And it's the same with women, it's the same with indigenous people, and there are many other groups that deserve to have their day of recognition as well, or their year of recognition. You bring up this issue of white man privilege, and that's something that needs to be addressed by white men who have the privilege. They are born into privilege just because of their skin color and because of the status that they carry and they protect for themselves too. So we would like to see people like you develop more understanding of the people in our societies who are underserved, marginalized. And that's why we have these special recognitions. February was Black History Month in the United States. They certainly deserve some attention for their issues, which still exist today. So that's kind of my answer to that.
Yes, one last question, please, because we have two other speakers to listen to. Thank you, please.
Hello, thank you for your presentation and the atmosphere you created in this room.
Can you?
Yeah, she can scream.
So I studied in Canada and I did a research on access to safe drinking water for Indigenous community. And the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, promised to end all water drinking advisory. So my question is there improvement with the relationship with the government? Are Indigenous communities more listened to, and are there more representation in institution? And my second question is, do Indigenous community enjoy autonomy over the resource they gain from tourism, or is there still a control by government and managed by the government?
Okay, your first question is about water, and it's something I deal with close to my heart in my community. Being a past leader, just this last 2 years, we had to fight for water for our people. It's not an easy task when you have to deal from a federal government, provincial government, and then you have to see who's going to pay for it, who's going to support us. And it took us 20 years for 5 homes to get drinking water. Every time they came down, that family would bring a glass of what they were drinking and what they had to do. It was slime, it was, you name, the worst type of water you can think of. In our language, we call that selkwa. And that doesn't mean to us that's good water, it's just water. And when we look at that, I really thought to myself, how do people can live like to this day and age to be a part of that? And yet, we still continue to fight that fight. And when we finally got it after 20 years. And yet, they always say it's a one-time funding. So when they deal with you, they'll never look at you again. So it took us 20 years to finally get them on the table to agree of what they had to do was drill the wells where we told them to drill them, not where they tell us where to drill them. And that was only the fight for 20 years, where they were going to put the water where we wanted to dig the wells. That was it. That went on for 8 terms. It was crazy, or 10 terms, pardon me. And our terms are 2-year terms on chief and council. So, you know, that's the question I look at. I mean, from a community-based to deal with government, it's not easy. I think everybody around that table wants to help one another, but it's always restricted. There's always rules to the money. You just don't hand it to you and say, fix it. It would be that easy, but it ain't that easy. Everybody has their own agendas, and it was hard for us to get them on that table, but we got them on that table, and I cornered them, and I finally told them, if you can drink that water today, I said, our water is good. We poured him a glass, he wouldn't drink it. So help our people. We've been dealing with this for 20 years. That's all we want. And we got that equality from that. From the government, I guess, again, we have a young prime minister that makes promises. That will always make promises. And the next prime minister will make promises. It's more of a campaign for them, in my mind. As a politician, you say what people want to hear. And I think we have a better opportunity. Yes, we're working with the Liberals at a provincial level, at a federal level. Provincially, we're working with another government. And again, you get caught in between those. So who helps you and who doesn't help you? So again, we have different initiatives, different economic opportunities that come with that, but there's also social issues that we deal with. You know, in the Indigenous tourism world, that gives us our own power back. That gives us the opportunity to grow with where we want to be. And yes, we get a lot of support from the government based on the programs through the different Indigenous organizations that we run across Canada, provincially. So we're slowly getting our stories, we're slowly getting our culture back in that form, if that answers your question.